Hey everybody, Ketwolski here, checking in with another one of our hashtag Star Trek Picard discussion review videos. Today, we're of course going to be talking about Picard Episode 7, Nepenthe. So, like all of my other Picard review episodes, we're going to be going through the things that I really enjoyed, some of the things that I did not enjoy, and then kind of wrapping it up a little bit with some of my plots and ideas and theories based off of what happened in this episode. But before we get into that stuff, I do want to go ahead and say that this episode was really awesome. This was a rather unexpected episode after the very, very plot-heavy and exciting episode from last week, episode 6. We do a nice little story beat pause here where we go into the much more emotional, character-driven stuff here, which honestly served as a fantastic story break in between all the different reveals that we had in episode 6 and all the things that happened there, and then kind of leading into the finale of the show. This was an awesome insertion for the production team to do, and it was a fantastic way to explore not only the revelation to Soji that she is in fact an android, but also the revelation that Agnes is in fact kind of a secret agent slash spy operating for Commodore O, even though she doesn't really want to be. So they kind of delve into both of those kind of revelations and take an opportunity to really kind of character pause here. And then obviously we deal with the whole situation with Hugh on the Borg cube, but we'll get into that. But I really, really enjoyed this episode. It's definitely probably in my second or third favorite. So right now for me, episode 6 is probably my top. Episode 1 is probably number 2, and then this one slots right in at number 3. And that's saying something because the competition is rather tough right now. All 6 of these episodes coming before this one were really, really great. And then this one, of course, really was fantastic all within itself. So it is a very fierce competition to even get into the top 3 or top 4. So congratulations to those guys and gals who put this episode together. Okay, so one of the first things that happens in this episode is we finally get the second half of the scene that we kind of got teased way earlier on. I think it was in episode 3, where Commodore O meets up with Agnes outside of the Daystrom Institute. And we do know from the trailers leading up to Star Trek Picard that she was going to mind meld with her. And what she shows her are these series of images here provided by space.com. They actually snipped all these together and put them together in this one giant collage. So thank you guys and gals over there for doing that. I do appreciate it. But these are all the different flashes that we see. And there's a whole lot of different things here. Now, we see that circle that we saw from the trailer and that I brought up in my last video where we're still not quite sure what's going on with that. And then we see several planets being destroyed for some reason, and then all of the what appears to be Romulans standing around that circle going crazy, freaking out. It looks like Commodore O is ripping her face off. One of them shoots themselves in the head. And they're, I assume, seeing this, but we know that clearly not all of them died because Commodore O exists, and it's not really clear what this circle is, but these are the images that kind of motivated Agnes, not so that she's being mind-controlled, but motivated her to kill Bruce Maddox and basically feel guilty over the work that she had done in creating synthetic life. And she kind of felt guilty throughout the rest of this episode, A, because she was responsible for them being tracked, throughout the entire thing by Narek, and then B, the whole situation with her having to kill Bruce Maddox, and then I assume most likely having to try to kill Soji and potentially even Picard, which is something she clearly did not want to do. But these were the images here. What they all are, I'm not sure, but it is quite interesting and how it all came about. I assume we're going to find out probably in the next episode or the episode after that. So one of the things that I really enjoyed were these really cool Romulan ships. I think they called them the Snakeheads or something like that. They looked really very Romulan in design. They kind of looked a little bit, more, I guess, self-contained than what we've seen in Romulans. They really like to have their giant wings, but they definitely had the kind of paneling on the sides that looked very Romulan in there. And then obviously everything was all green. This is Narek's ship that he gets into, that he jumps into, and then follows the La Sirena, and then follows them kind of going on to Nepenthe. What is interesting here is that he is, following them instead of going for the planet that Soji revealed in the previous episode, but I assume that they still want Soji at least intact, or to probably hunt her down to destroy her, because obviously his last act there was to destroy her. So those people who are saying, well, why is he following them at all? He already got the information he wanted. Well, he either wants her for more information, he still cares about her, which we obviously already know, or he's trying to fulfill the last act of his mission, which is to destroy her. At least that's probably why he's telling everyone that he's going after her. Of course, this fantastic sequence here with Hugh and Narek's sister, this was just great. I really enjoyed it. I like the fact that she is still kind of this over-the-top villainess, and she's a little bit more of a caricature than some of the other, folks that we see in this show. And I like that about her because she's really just evil, and she seems to really enjoy being an evil Romulan Zat-Vash person / Tal Shiar. She really enjoys doing that, and she enjoys torturing Hugh in her own way here. I think that's I think the sequence was really rather well done. done. And I like the fact that she admits the fact that she can't kill him, at least in this sequence, but she has no problems with destroying the XBs in front of him, which makes him, of course, feel extraordinarily guilty and then sets their kind of plot point, in motion for the rest of the episode. One of the few things that I was surprised that I enjoyed in this episode was Elnor. Now, my feelings on Elnor have been a bit indifferent up to this point. He was just okay character. I didn't have any kind of negative or real positive feelings towards him in any way. That's only because we hadn't spent that much time with him. But in this one, he actually gets to do something that doesn't just involve standing around being kind of the butt of the joke or just following around with whatever Picard wants. He's operating on his own here with Hugh, and they're kind of running on this little mission to take back the cube for the XBs and the Borg that are on there from the Romulans, because he's tired of dealing with the Romulans, and obviously they don't care about the XBs at all, as according to what just happened in the previous scene where they just murdered a bunch of them in front of Hugh to try to get him to talk. So I liked this whole little adventure they went on. Obviously, yeah, cool, Elnor is like this really big badass with a sword and stuff like that, but I want to know a little bit more about his character, and the fact that he refused to leave the cube and stay there with Hugh to kind of help out there, I think speaks really well to his character, and I hope that we get to see more of him in the next episode. One of the great sequences that kind of went through several different iterations throughout this episode was this fun, like, little cat and mouse chase sequence between Narek and the La Sirena crew. And obviously these three together, without Picard and Elnor there, are kind of gelling really, really well, I thought. Obviously Agnes is acting super weird, but they're also still supporting each other, supporting Elnor when he decided to stay on the cube, and also kind of caring for Agnes even when she's kind of having that breakdown, even though they don't know why she's having that breakdown, but they're definitely caring for her, and those bonds are really kind of played up quite a bit between these three in this episode. And then, of course, the whole thing that happened in the end that we'll get to. But I did like the fact that we saw more interaction between them, and they didn't just waste this opportunity to kind of build on those characters. Obviously, the big things that happened in this episode was the return of Counselor Troi and Commander Riker and their daughter Kestra, and the reveal of their deceased son Thad. Now we'll get to Thad in a little bit and Kestra in a little bit. The two big things that happened here are obviously Counselor Troi and Riker returning. I thought that, Marina Sirtis stepped right back into the role of Counselor Troi just beautifully. Her whole sequence here with Picard, where she clearly knows that he's in trouble, and she probably detects the fact that he's dealing with the weight of his diagnosis of his illness right before he left on this adventure. I definitely got the sense that she sensed all of those things from him using her Beta Z powers, and really just knowing him for 30 some odd years. She probably just knows these things intuitively about him. So I thought this was a fantastic touching moment between the two of them when they met up, and really every sequence between them at the house here, at the Riker kind of farm here, was fantastic. I really enjoyed all of it. It was so well done, and this provided a fantastic story beat, like I said at the beginning, to kind of break apart some of the more intense action and reveal from episode 6, and probably giving us a little bit of a pause before we really launch into even more intense action kind of in episode 7, 8, 9, and 10. Another fantastic sequence here with Will Riker finally meeting up with Jean-Luc Picard. I don't know what it is about this scene. I've obviously watched this episode probably 3 or 4 times at this point, but every time that he sees him entering the house and he smiles and he hugs him, I smile too, and I catch myself doing it. I don't know why. It's just kind of like a instinctive thing that just happens. This just makes me happy on the inside, and I love it. So one of the best things about this episode was Kestra. I thought that Kestra, I kind of theorized this months ago that Kestra was going to be inside of the show. That was just based off of the IMDb, credit titles, and then this actress's specific age, and Kestra being the name of Troy's deceased sister. So I kind of theorized that. It wasn't that hard to kind of depict that was going to happen. But her character in this was way more substantial than I thought it was going to be. I thought she was just going to be kind of hanging around a little bit, but the focus was going to be on, Will Riker and Deanna Troi. But the focus really was on all three for the most part. And what was really interesting was Kestra's interaction with Soji. This childlike wonder and excitement about what Soji is, I feel like added a little bit of levity to the very serious issues and questions that Soji is facing. Something that Picard and Deanna and Riker would not have been able to really do as adults and as people with experience, because she's definitely pushing them away throughout this entire episode, and even Kestra in some regards, but she's obviously connecting with her more. And the fact that she's got this huge wonderment to and excitement to what Soji actually is, and that she's the daughter of Data, and that she kind of, has some lineage there, and the fact that she's an android and she has mucus and all this fun stuff. Her excitement about that, I feel like, helps create a little bit of levity to the earth-shattering information that Soji's kind of going through. And it's really super smart of the writers and the showrunners and the producers to put these two characters together and play it up like this. Kestra was not overdone. The actress did a fantastic job with providing some very sound child perspective advice to Soji. And we find out, Soji's very young and she's dealing with a very unknown situation and she's not really trusting adults. So she trusts in this kid who's gone through quite a bit of stuff and is very mature for her age, but she trusts in the fact that she's kind of excited to meet her, and she kind of almost builds a little bit of excitement in Soji about what she is, and maybe her realizing that it's not that bad. It's not all doom and gloom being an android. Yes, it is terrible what has happened to her and the fact that she's been lied to her entire life, but there's an other side to this that Soji has not really been dealing with, and I don't think she would have been able to really even begin to grasp it if she hadn't dealt with someone like Kestra, who provided this other kind of perspective as to what is going on and to who she is. This was a fantastically done set of sequences. There's obviously multiple sequences throughout this episode with these two characters together. It was so well written and beautifully done, and I cannot praise these folks enough for putting these characters together. It was a genius choice. One of the things that definitely touched my heart was the story about the deceased Thad, which was the son, the first child of William Riker and Deanna Troi. Apparently he had this very serious illness that could only be cured by developing cultures in a positronic matrix, which they couldn't get because of the synthetic ban, and he unfortunately passed away on this planet, this Nepenthe, which has very strong healing properties, which I assume probably kept Thad alive for a bit longer. I'm just assuming that because that's why they would go there. But we saw this picture here of Admiral Picard kind of holding this little baby who's wearing this little admiral's outfit, which is hilarious and very, very cute and very beautiful. And if you see in the background behind Picard in the image, it almost looks like the conference room, of the Enterprise E in some regards. It's kind of what it looks like to me, at least, with the ships back there and the panel on the wall and stuff like that. So this was obviously, in my opinion, taking on the Enterprise perhaps right as he was leaving, I think, maybe something like that. But I just really like this image, and the fact that Thad had passed away was an unexpected level of emotion that I was not prepared for. But I like the fact that him passing connects back to the reason that Picard, one of the reasons that Picard wouldn't have gone to the Rikers to begin with. A lot of people had criticisms for why didn't Picard just go to Deanna and Riker to begin with and have them go on this adventure? Well, because he knows they've already dealt with loss and they have this daughter, and he's not going to ask him to do that. There was a whole subplot thing that I talked a little bit about because he understands the risks that they would be facing, because he did something similar at the the end of the TNG finale, the two-parter there, where he was kind of jumping through time and stuff like that. But this also drives the point home that he wouldn't have just gone to them, and he felt guilty for even being there and all that stuff like that because of the loss of Thad and the danger that he'd be putting them into, but he had no choice. So I like that there's a big emotional payoff with that decision way earlier on in the season, and how it just kind of connects to what's going on and where the Rikers are at emotionally and maturely as a couple and as a family unit. I thought it was fantastic, and I just really loved this little baby photograph. So I don't know if anybody else felt like this, but when Raffi was talking to Agnes saying that she's going to give her whatever she needs to help relax, I really thought that they were just going to go get high off of the snake bite stuff and get drunk, which would have been funny, but also would have put too much of a comedic light onto Raffi's addiction issues. So I'm glad that they didn't do that, and they went with the, cake and milk thing, in that kind of perspective, as her kind of being a supportive shoulder to cry on for Agnes because she was trying to help her figure out what the hell was going on with her. But I thought that's where they were going with the scene, but I'm glad they didn't do that. One of the other fantastic things in this episode, of course, was William T. Riker. I know that from reports and interviews, Johnathan Frakes said that he was very nervous about returning to the role of William Riker, and he needed some guidance from Sir Patrick on how to get back into the shoes, so to speak. But in my opinion, I don't think he needed any help. He clearly masters it very, very well. His character reads just like William T. Riker, and I like the fact, and this scene in particular where Riker's kind of guessing what's going on, and he kind of, kind of pokes at Picard a little bit. I like the fact that he's not just talking to him as a subordinate, which is what we see the Riker Picard interaction is predominantly them as as a leader and subordinate, but this case they're actually colleagues. Now of course he still reveres him and he knows he's an admiral and all that stuff like that. That's not what I mean by necessarily ranks, but they're talking to each other as equals in a lot of ways in this regard, where he's like, listen, you don't just get to decide all these different things because we're not on the bridge of an Enterprise, and I am not your subordinate. Nobody is your subordinate. We're here as equals with equal amount of experience dealing with all sorts of crazy things out there in the cosmos, and we need to work together. And I really liked the way that they did the scene, and Johnathan Frakes' acting and the way this was written by Michael Chabon was fantastically done, I think, because the way that this is worded and the way that they're interacting with each other felt a little bit different, but also very much the same. And I don't know how to really describe it other than that. It just felt like he was kind of speaking to him a little bit more of like, I'm your coworker and we're a team here, as opposed to I'm your subordinate and I need some direction from you and I'm just providing input. And I like the fact that they did this sequence because it kind of created a level playing field for both actors and characters throughout the rest of the episode. So this sequence between Troi and Soji was fantastically done. She slips again right back into not only the character of Deanna Troi, but also plays up the Counselor Troi role fantastically. She does that greatly here. She provides a very comforting story to put some things in perspective for Soji, which allows her to then open up and kind of share what she's feeling. And she doesn't really respond at all. She just kind of does a very Counselor Troi-esque reaction of listening and kind of just embracing her, very much acting like a counselor to someone who she cares very deeply for, even though she clearly just met them. But she knows that she's connected back to Data and all these different things, and is kind of feeling that out in some regards. And I love this sequence. It was really well done by both Isa Briones, who's definitely done a fantastic job acting in this particular episode, but also just the interaction between the two of them I thought was fantastic and really, really well done, I thought. Now, obviously, the extra bit of them being in this garden and being in this, rich soil, and the fact that she's eating the fruit and she's laying in the dirt, and the location that this is a very healing place. It's a very rapidly, growing location. They mentioned several times in this episode that the healing properties of the planet are, fantastic, and it's rejuvenating, all stuff like that. And so clearly this is a very healing kind of moment for not only Soji as a character, she's kind of getting some things off of her chest, but also kind of the tone of the conversation is an attempt to kind of dig into the issues that she's facing and kind of start to heal some of those wounds. So I really liked that. It was a really fantastic sequence, really well done. Obviously, one of the saddest moments that we've probably seen in Star Trek Picard so far, I think, is the passing of Hugh. I was under the understanding, and I've said this several times in the past, that Hugh was going to be one of the people to bite it rather quickly. And that definitely happened here in episode 7. I thought Johnny Delarco did a fantastic job, so much so that I was actually really sad to see him go, because I wanted him to come back for the second season or the third season or how many other seasons we're going to get of this show, because he was just great. He was just fantastic, and I was very, very sad to see him kind of bite it in this episode, but I thought he did just a great job. He played up the role of Hugh probably better than I could have hoped for and imagined. He did a fantastic job of taking a character, a relatively minor character from the Next Generation, and just expanding him out and maturing him into this more grown adult person with way more responsibility than we'd ever seen that character have before. He did a fantastic job. So tip of the hat to Johnny Delarco. You did a fantastic work, and if we ever get a prequel series to Star Trek Picard, hopefully they'll bring you back. One of the other sequences that I love was obviously this fantastic kind of discussion that happened at the dinner table, where obviously the intention was this to be the ready room where they were going to come up with the plan. But I love the discussions and the way that Picard talks to Soji, and he becomes kind of a bit more Picard as the story kind of progresses, where he acts a little bit more curious, and he's like, listen to my voice and read my body language and trust me who I am. Like, he's trying to reach out to her and connect with her in a way that he hadn't done so far up to this point. He was being a little bit brash with her kind of throughout this entire episode, until Counselor Troi kind of checks him and he's like, listen, you need to act like the captain we remember. And he's kind of been going through this entire journey throughout the entire series so far, which is to kind of get back to who he was instead of that person who was essentially wasting away on the vineyard. So it's been this really long character arc for him kind of getting back to this role. So hopefully we start to see even more Captain Picard-ish kind of attitude coming forward in episodes 7, 8, 9, and 10. Episodes 8, 9, and 10. I can't wait to see what happens there. One of the other sequences that were really powerful, obviously, was Agnes's decision to self-sacrifice. She knew that they were tracking them based off of the stuff that she had chewed back on, the Daystrom Institute back in episode 3. So she made the conscious choice to put herself into a coma so that the tracking device would go offline. How she knew that would work, I have no idea how she knew that would work. I assumed that she actually thought it was going to kill her and not actually put her into a coma. I'm assuming that she thought that whatever she took was going to just turn off the tracking device because she would be dead. So it kind of was a win-win for her. She didn't die, but she also turned off the tracker. So great job, Agnes. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and jump into the things that I did not like in this episode. And really, there was not really anything. The only thing I do want to point out was there is one simple little issue that I noticed kind of inside of the episode. And that is when Johnny DeLarco kind of peers around the corner, you clearly see that the blade is already inside of his neck. So obviously they did a poor job with the edit on that one. But hey, it is what it is. It's just something that I noticed that was kind of a bit of a gaffe in my opinion. But I wanted to point it out to you guys. Okay, so now I want to go ahead and jump right into my theories and plot predictions and ideas about what may be going on in the following on episodes leading up to our season finale. Okay, so the first image I want to talk about is this one that Raffi noticed inside of the Borg cube. And these were the drawings that the XBs, the Romulan XBs, were kind of tracing on inside of their little psych ward. Now, I'd referenced this way back in, I think, episode 2 of what the heck these things were. There was no explanation for it. They just kind of glossed over it and moved on. And here we see them again kind of zoomed in. And this, to me, seems like various different things. To me, it kind of connects back to like an atom, a symbol for the atom in some regards with multiple types of electrons. It also kind of looks a little bit like the necklace that the Asha twins wear, and it could also have something to do with that weird circle that we see everybody standing around, all those Romulans that went and shot themselves in the head and everything. I'm not quite sure what these circles mean, but obviously we're going to find out at some point. But there's different variations. If you see, there's different variations of the circles and kind of the way that they're drawn. But this one in particular they zoomed in on is rather interesting. And I'm wondering also potentially if this is a planet with 2 moons, because we definitely know that that's where they need to go in order to find the laboratory supposedly that Dr. Maddox used to kind of develop, the different synthetic life forms. That could also be it. But this was definitely a rather interesting one, but I'm not quite sure what it means just yet. One of the other things I think everybody notices that, Elnor, while trapped on the Borg cube, activates the Fenris Ranger SOS little badge there. So this, in my opinion, is going to obviously draw the Fenris Rangers to the Borg cube. Seven's going to pop in. She's going to help, liberate everybody. She's going to go blasty blast and save everyone's life. And I think at this point, she's going to take over the role that Hugh wanted, which is to be kind of a guide and a support figure for these Romulans. Obviously, in her episode, she saw the death of Icheb and all of those other Borgs that were being tortured. So this potentially she's had her revenge plot. This could now be her kind of redemption subplot where she steps up and saves not only the remaining Borg drones, but also the XBs from the Zotvash and the other Romulan security forces on the Borg cube and kind of takes it over and escapes with them to try to protect them and save their lives. So I cannot wait for that sequence to happen. That's my theory, but I'm pretty sure that's kind of where we're headed. One of the other things that was rather interesting is when they were talking here on the pier, Riker and Picard, he mentioned that he was on active reserve status, and only a very, very good reason would call him back to duty and ship out again for Starfleet. I don't think that line was thrown in there happenstancely. I think that they were just trying to remind people that Riker may put the uniform back on. I don't know if we're going to see the Titan, but he may put the uniform back on and get back into action for something rather specific going on. There was a lot of discussion about when Picard should contact Starfleet, so I'm wondering if at some point things come to a head and he has to reach out to Starfleet. Maybe that's when Riker gets recalled. Maybe a war between the Federation and the Romulans breaks out because this treaty thing that they signed falls apart, and then a war breaks out and he has to go back onto, this active duty service and get back into the captain's chair, and that's going to maybe potentially be the plot of the second season, is this war between the Federation and the Romulans. That may be something that's going on. I don't know, a couple of theories there, but I definitely don't think that line was thrown in there for no reason. One of the other things that we saw from the ending preview for next week's episode was this little kind of thing here, which is obviously, again, that weird circle thing. What I'm assuming are Romulans standing around it. Commodore O is talking to all of them, and then they all see the future that O shared with Agnes, which is this weird thing about all of these worlds destroying and something to do with, Soji. What all of this means and how all of these things are connected, what this pool or this device means and how it functions or what they're actually seeing, how any of these things work is completely foreign to me. I assume we're going to find out in the next couple of episodes before the finale, or maybe even at the finale, but this was definitely interesting, and I can't wait to figure out what this is. One other thing that we saw during the preview for next week's episode was this face here. Obviously, this is some kind of advanced, positronic being. The yellow eyes kind of make me think it's positronic. It looks almost like a more advanced version of Arium that we saw back in Star Trek Discovery, but I'm not sure if there's going to be any kind of direct connection there, or if this potentially is what Soji looks like underneath her skin. That could definitely be the case here. I'm not sure, but I did see this and I thought it was kind of cool and I wanted to share it with you guys. All right, everybody, that wraps up my very short, rather long review of this particular episode, Nepenthe of Star Trek Picard. Again, I really love this episode. It's probably in my third slot right now, which sounds weird when you say that out loud, but it's in my third slot right now, and it may move up or may move down depending on these follow-on episodes, 8, 9, and 10. I'm curious to see what happens with all of those, but I am, of course, dying to know what you guys and gals thought about this. What did you think about the return of Riker and Troi? What did you think about Kestra? And what do you think is going to be going on and happening with Agnes and that weird circle thing that we keep seeing? I'm curious to hear about what you guys think. Get your comments up down below, and we'll go ahead and get the conversation started. Live long and prosper, my Trekkies!